Welcome to the 359. I'm Ben Fox-Rubin.
I'm Joni Salzman.
Sprint and T-Mobile are finally getting hitched. After years of will they or won't they merger talks, the third and fourth biggest U.S. telcos agreed to a $26 billion deal over the weekend. T-Mobile's German parent Deutsche Telekom will gain control of Sprint, and the new company will be named T-Mobile. So the deal is supposed to close early next year. The question is, will this actually pass muster with the government?
Well, it didn't before, but it's anyone's guess now.
I don't know.
The Trump administration has been friendlier in theory to mergers and acquisitions, except for
the ones that they don't like.
Yeah, except for the ones that they don't like Time Warner and AT&T. And there's always questions about whether that's because Time Warner owns CNN and Trump doesn't like CNN and yada, yada, yada. But
right.
as far as I know...
This has a lot to do with the fact that U.S. consumers would go from having 4 major options to just 3 major options in, mobile and telecommunications. So that's a big reason why regulators may hesitate over this type of situation. But it's still a long way to go. There's still at least probably another year. So for now, customers probably shouldn't really expect much change, right?
Yeah, nothing's going to change until regulatory approval and all the close. And assuming they get regulatory approval, they can actually figure out what they're going to do.
Yeah.
As a merged company.
So just ahead of Facebook's F8 developer conference, which kicks off tomorrow, Joan, you wrote about the company's VR business, Oculus, and how they're working with an immersive theater concept.
No, they're kind of inventing a new way to watch VR. Mm-hmm. They're developing this experience. The woman who is spearheading it, she described it as Sleep No More, the immersive play meets Journey, that indie video game, where in your living room or wherever you have your headset set up, you, at a point in time, you put on your headset and you enter into this virtual world where remotely a cast of motion captured actors are playing characters in this story.
Like in a live action type of thing.
Yeah, yeah. And so they can see you and they can react to you. They're not in the same room as you, so they can't touch you. And you can't touch them, but they can react to you in a way that a pre-programmed avatar or an AI-powered avatar just can't match.
Did you get a chance to try this
No.
or even see,
it's
some
still,
sort of demo?
Yeah, it's not coming out until next year. Tentatively, that's a tentative idea of when it could possibly come out. They're still in the very early stages of it. But I have done some experiences with live actors before, and they're a lot of fun. This is an idea that if it works, it's a way for VR to scale an experience like that.
Do you think that there's money in it for Oculus or Facebook?
Well, I mean, if you think of the fact that immersive theater, without any kind of virtual reality element to it, is booming. It's very popular and has been growing. And people pay $100 a pop to go see Sleep No More.
That's interesting.
I can imagine. I mean, you have to imagine that if people are going to get an experience like this, and there are already people that are willing to pay hundreds of dollars for a computer and an Oculus Rift or whatever headset that they enable, they would be interested in paying a high price for a bespoke, unique experience like that.
Yeah. So also, just as a reminder, come back to CNET on Tuesday for our coverage of the F8 conference. Do you have any expectations for the show, what you expect to see? Maybe Mark Zuckerberg goes back up on stage and apologizes yet again about Cambridge Analytica? I don't know.
It's definitely the highest stakes of an F8 since F8 started, right? I mean, it's a time of greatest uncertainty for Facebook. So what they focus on will be telling in terms of how they want to turn around the company.
Yeah. If you want to read more about these stories, check us out on CNET. I'm Ben Fox-Rubin.
I'm Joni Salzman.
Thanks for listening.
And thanks, everybody, for joining us for the recording of the audio podcast. It's time for me to do my part of the paycheck and look through the chat for questions and comments. Sure. First and foremost, this VR thing is intriguing. Do we think we're going to see things like people being able to act out their favorite movie scenes with the actual characters or something like that?
Cool.
I mean, what kind of reenactments can we expect out of this?
Well, I don't know the subject matter of the experience that Oculus is working on that they're planning to release next year. But that's the thing about VR that I think is really exciting, is that anything is possible, really. That suggestion, all it really matters is if you want to have a Star Wars experience, people that license and own Star Wars, Disney, being like, yeah, we want to do that too. And we know that the people that own the property, the Star Wars franchise, are willing to do that. They have a partnership with Magic Leap so that you could feasibly, assuming Magic Leap is actually real and has a product that is released, if you have a Magic Leap headset, which is augmented reality overlay stuff, mixed reality overlay stuff over the real world, you'd be able to, our work cafeteria, if you're wearing a Magic Leap headset, you could transform it into the cantina in Star Wars. Or around your desk, you could have, instead of having, a Siri or an Alexa, you could have a C-3PO who just sits there, and when you ask it a question, it'll tell you an answer.
Yeah. The promise of a lot of these things sound super cool, but you see a lot of them, a lot more than I would argue most tech reporters do. How close do you think that we actually are to some of that promise? Or are we still kind of in the fumbling through trying to figure out what this is supposed to look like phase?
Right. In terms of, Magic Leap, keep that aside because who knows what's going on there. But if you're talking about having like an immersive experience with a live actor, that stuff's already happening, and it's lots of fun when you can do it. Over the last couple of weeks, Scott Stein and I were at Tribeca, and there are a few experiences, one in particular, where you are in a virtual experience with a live actor in a motion capture suit in that same room with you. That's a lot more interactive than somebody who is remote in a motion capture suit. So it would be different, but it's really fun and really exciting.
How does that work? Oh, can you like touch each other?
Yeah.
And you know.
They react to you so.
But you're wearing VR headsets, so you're kind of blindfolded?
No, I see them, but they're a character. So the actor that I interacted with was a frog woman who was sweeping the floor, and she was scolding me when I reached out and touched her. She was like, "Jack, leave me alone. You're supposed to be helping me clean." Which is, that's silly.
That is silly.
But that's the fun about it.
I feel extremely high right now just thinking about that.
It's all very silly, but it's super fun. You get to feel like a little bit like a little kid, where the fantasies that you have in your head that you're imagining feel so real. When you reach out and bat at something and it's actually there, but it's completely fantastical world. It's fun.
Let me see if I get this right. So you're wearing a VR headset, and the live action actors around you are like these weird avatars, like a talking frog.
Yeah.
They're not wearing VR headsets.
No.
But they're wearing a suit that can capture their movements.
Exactly. Like how Lord of the Rings made Smeagol. Like the exact same thing. So that when they move and their expressions and their body language is translated into this avatar in a one-to-one sort of way.
Was this something that was super popular at Tribeca?
It was hard to get into.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
It was very popular.
I got to wonder how many characters you can have on screen at the same time, because that's going to take a buttload of processing power. Remember how many, they said it took hundreds of hours to render out Gollum in The Lord of the Rings, to do that in real time with multiple participants. That's just daunting.
It is. You're touching on one of the challenges that people don't think about for VR creators, is that not only is that a lot of rendering to do, but it's live rendering. Like with a 3D animated film or something like Lord of the Rings, where you have a heavy CG element, you can shoot it and then you can just stick it in your servers and let them render for however long as it needs. But in a virtual reality experience, because it's live, it needs to live render. And that's why, when I was in this experience with a live actor, I had a backpack that was my computer. So I could walk around the room. And it could live render everything that was happening.
Well, and how graphically detailed was the frog? Was it kind of like a pixelated frog, or
no?
Was it
it didn't look.
looking?
It didn't look like Lord of the Rings. It didn't look photorealistic, but it wasn't designed to look photorealistic. There's ways to cheat, and cheating isn't even the right word. There's ways to
stylized.
So
it was a stylized look.
It was a stylized way of seeing the world, which also made it more fun.
I'd be more frightened if it was hyper realistic, because then I feel kind of Matrixy, conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
I would rather see it kind of artistic.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Let's stay on the topic of VR. How are they going to make this cost effective to the average user? Is this going to be something that's like a theme park ride where you get a ticket? Is it going to be super expensive? People are kind of worried that, how are we actually going to participate in this as an average citizen?
Right. Well, I have no idea about their pricing ideas. What we know on the technology side is that technology for VR is continually getting cheaper and faster, just kind of like all technology is. As people invest more in it, it gets faster, cheaper, better. and considering that the people that are already investing in these technologies are continuing to put a lot of resources behind it, I can imagine that the actual technology side of it is going to become more accessible as the years go on. And then in terms of experiences like this, I mean, I don't know how much they could charge. It depends on demand. I mean, Sleep No More is a really good example. If you don't know it, it's an immersive play in New York. It opened in 2011.
It is really cool.
It's really cool. It was only supposed to run for like 2 months, and it's still running 7 years later. And those experiences, for just the baseline, it's like $100 for a ticket. But people will spend up to like $400 to get this very immersive. You go to a fancy dinner beforehand at their restaurant that's all in the same style as the experience itself. So I guess accessibility matters on what is accessible to the person and what value you put on having something that's so elaborate.
Yeah.
So
happen.
for me, the Sleep No More is something that gets mentioned a lot in conversations around in New York. A lot of people like doing it. For me, I have kids, so I've never actually gone to see the show. So
Your kids aren't 7 years old, though.
What's that?
Your kids aren't 7 years old.
What's that? Why would that matter?
Because it's been going on for 7 years.
Oh, okay. That's true. You're forcing me to admit that I'm just a lame-o, which is fine.
It's been well established, Ben.
So needless to say, the point for me is that having these types of experiences that you could potentially be able to do in your home if you don't go out that much
Right.
could be really helpful. But anyway, I eventually got to that point.
Well, I mean, it's a little bit like do I stay in and watch Netflix or do I go out to the movies? Like, there's that kind of calculus involved. And so the idea with having a virtual play with live actors happen in your home is that you're kind of striking a little bit of a balance. Like, you can have an immersive experience, something that's maybe high end, that maybe is inaccessible in some ways, but is accessible in the sense that you don't have to be in New York to be able to go see this.
Yeah.
You have to be in New York to see Sleep No More. You have to be in LA to see things that are going on there. But with something like this, you could be anywhere and you could still be able to participate in the fun if it's something that you think is going to be up your alley.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of immersive events, Sunjoy wants to know if we're going to see VR upgrade to the silent disco where people dance and listen to music over their headphones.
I don't know. That would be fun.
That would be fun, right?
That's a thing?
Yeah.
Silent disco.
Silent disco. You'd need wireless headphones, or wireless headsets, I should say. But it's feasible, right?
I feel like it's feasible right now. If you wanted to, I feel like a lot of social VR is so clunky right now that it feels a little bit like that.
Yeah.
Like nobody's listening to the same, like no one's marching to the beat of the same drum.
Stay in your own home and dance with somebody in like Calcutta or something.
Just dance.
Staying on the topic of, moving on. We're done with VR. Go ahead and put your questions and comments about where you think this VR experience could go. Where do you want to see it go? What is an event or immersive experience you would like to participate in? Let's talk about T-Mobile. Lost Legacy. Who would be the CEO if the merger happens? And expanding on that from Joseph Goss, do you think Sprint users and Sprint phones will be able to take advantage of the T-Mobile network? And what did you guys think will happen to Boost Mobile and Virgin Mobile?
They're still figuring out. So to answer the last question, they're still figuring out what to actually do with Boost, Virgin, Metro PCS. That's still being determined. As far as the CEO, I'm pretty sure it's going to be John Legere.
That's what I remember.
Yeah. John Legere to serve as chief executive. So that's answering two of those questions. What was the other? Oh, a big issue with this deal in the first place is to try to leverage the two different networks. So arguably, your service should, if everything works out the right way, your service should get better if you're a T-Mobile or a Sprint customer.
Right.
And they could potentially serve as a better competitor to Verizon. Which Verizon has been marketing itself as like the best, most trusted, biggest network. So that would probably be the biggest benefit for consumers, especially in smaller markets, like rural markets. I would probably say like T-Mobile and Sprint are pretty good in the major cities already, but as you migrate out into rural and suburban areas, you probably get spottier service with those guys.
We got a little bit of criticism in the chat from Brian Prime. To the people that believe the merger is good in any form, they are delusional. T-Mobile is now basically the same price as Verizon. This will hurt American bills and reduce their options. Mm-hmm. What kind of impact can we project over billing, pricing, and competition now that it's going to whittle back to 3 primary providers in the U.S.?
So the argument from Sprint and T-Mobile, which granted they're the ones that have to convince everybody that this is going to be okay, is that they're actually going to be a better competitor against AT&T and Verizon, which are two much bigger companies and have more customers. So that's their argument. From the general perspective that you go from 4 competitors to 3 competitors, it's hard to say. I mean, like T-Mobile and Sprint have done a really good job of trying to create different ways to steal away Verizon and AT&T customers already. And you would hope from a customer perspective that that would continue, but you never really know. It's hard to say. And that's probably why the government is going to take a really hard look at this.
The competitive advocate would say that reducing 4 competitors to 3 is never going to be in the best interest of a consumer. But that's kind of, that's the hardline idea. The idea is that there's less competition. That means prices can go up. That means the amount of services that people have to offer could go down because there's not a 4th player forcing people to stay competitive.
Yeah. AT&T tried to buy T-Mobile quite a few years ago. They were in the top 2. At that point, they continue to be, and the government shut that one down. They said, no way is the number 2 player going to buy the number 4 player. That's not cool. Is it going to work that the 3 and 4 are going to merge? I don't know. It's kind of weird that this came up in the first place. Maybe maybe the lawyers got together and decided that, like, all right, we're gonna take the chance, maybe from like what you had said before about the Trump White House could potentially be a little friendlier to mergers, but it's hard to say.
Carlos Martinez, he's worried about his plan changing. He's got specialty needs for his plan. Mm-hmm. What should he be on the lookout for, and what can he do to try to protect himself?
Well, nothing's happening for a year.
At least a year.
Yeah, or so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'll take that long for regulatory approval, and if approved, then closing of the deal.
And we'll know more about that as time inches closer.
As the government decides whether or not to sue to block it.
Got it.
Yeah, and in the meantime, for specific types of deals and pricing, a lot of times when these types of things happen, you can get grandfathered in. That's not a guarantee or anything, and I think that that's still a lot of things to be worked out. But the intention from Sprint and T-Mobile in general is not to piss off their customer bases and send them, running away to AT&T and Verizon. So hopefully your plan stays the same, but I think that's still being hammered out.
I think it'd be kind of suicidal for them to start messing with the coverage plans too much or the pricing plans, because it will send people running, because there are plenty of viable options out there.
Well, maybe there won't be.
Ooh, good point. And for the record, this is going to be T-Mobile in name going forward. And that doesn't mean that the Sprint brand is going away, that the wireless plan is now being absorbed under T-Mobile.
I don't know if the
Sprint as a company still exists.
Well, I don't know. We'll find out.
Really?
I think they're going to, they may sunset the Sprint name. I wish Roger was here. He's having a great time in Hawaii right now.
As he's covering.
As he's covering this, of course. So.
As he's sitting on conference calls over the weekend in Hawaii.
But yeah, he is very much our mobile expert, and we wish he was here to help answer some of these questions. But hopefully we're doing okay.
We got a question about the UK. Well, we're not about the UK, in relation to a similar event that took place in the UK. Scott Myatt points out that a few years ago, T-Mobile and Orange merged in the UK to create EE. They pushed prices up, but became the best for 4G as a result, and now the most popular network in the UK. And Ayman says, do you think this merger will be similar to that merger with the EE in England?
That sounds like a big positive, and I think T-Mobile and Sprint are probably really interested in having that type of story be told. They're both talking about how this is going to help supercharge their businesses. That specifically was about 4G. They're looking at 5G, which is going to cost a lot of money to have that next generation of super fast speeds. So having them both work together and spend a lot of money together in investment could, I don't know, help T-Mobile and Sprint do a much better job with 5G, especially up against Verizon and AT&T, who they're spending tons of money doing that too.
So to expand on that, Srinjoy asks, what's up with the narrative that T-Mobile married Sprint just to get its spectrum for 5G? This looks like a typical political marriage in the medieval age, like Game of Thrones.
It's entirely possible. I mean, like
so?
Spectrum is a big play a lot of the time, anytime there's mergers and telcos. So I'm sure that had something to do with it, but I think they're both really hoping that together they're going to be able to, dethrone either AT&T as number 2 or Verizon as number 1. They've made a lot of noise as the 2 smaller players, and I think they're hoping to use this merger to push through and become an even bigger competitor. So that's what they're hoping.
All right. We are just about out of time. We do want to make a note that we will not have a show tomorrow because CNET will be knee-deep in live coverage of the F8 conference, so make sure to tune in for that. And we'll have Ben at the table, along with Ayaz and Bridget, commentating with Lexi on the floor. Where does it take place again? I always forget.
It's way out in California.
Somewhere in California, not
Somewhere
New York.
in California.
Somewhere in sunny California. It's at Facebook's headquarters, right? I think so. It's usually at the
Right at the HQ?
Yeah.
So we'll have everything from the floor there, and then the 359 podcast will resume on Wednesday. Before we go, we have a couple of great suggestions for VR experiences. A Dog says would want to put their wedding in VR so they can remember the wedding in the best way. That's kind of an interesting idea, right? Yeah. Could you see that happening? Custom companies that cater to...
the wedding industry is ridiculous. So if they could figure out a way to do it and then charge you a $300 premium because it's your wedding, I'm sure it could happen. And you could definitely, even right now, you could get a 360-degree... Without having a vendor who does it for you, you could get a 360-degree camera and plop it, if you're tech savvy, plop it somewhere in the middle of things.
Just have the bride hold it the whole time.
In her bouquet of flowers.
Ooh.
Dude.
Go for that ride.
All right, I'm quitting CNET, charging $18,000 for this idea every single time.
Sounds pretty reasonable.
Somebody would pay
reasonably priced.
You bring up the 360 camera, and Ricky B says, what about VR tickets to sporting events? And we've seen some 360 cameras plop down in the field. Well, not in the field, but near the field. And we've even seen that at concerts and stuff, too. I wonder if that could go into a full VR experience and what kind of technology that would take to truly capture the scope of that.
The NBA is the most active in this kind of thing. They've done a lot of streaming of live games in VR. They have a partnership with Magic Leap to do augmented reality stuff once Magic Leap is a reality, if it is ever a reality. So if you want to see and kind of play, have a thought experiment about what could possibly happen in that world, look at the NBA and see what they've been doing so far and kind of think about where that could go.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Are we dangerously close to Ready Player One?
I don't know, because I haven't seen the movie and I haven't read the book.
Oh, okay.
But I don't know. So sorry.
Had to ask. All right, and that is going to do it for us. We'll wrap up here. See you on Wednesday. Hopefully see you tomorrow for the Facebook Developers Conference. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and why don't you take us on out?
All right, cool. The 359 podcast is available on iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, FeedBurner, Google Play Music, the Amazon Echo, and, of course, CNET.com. Thanks, everybody, for listening, sending in your questions, and we'll see you again Wednesday.
Bye-bye.